G'day YouTube, Warbles on a lot here. I'd like to have a little bit of a chat about sport, about team sport, organised team sport, and how it appears to be a pan-Euro-Peon response to Napoleon. Okay? Now the thing about Napoleon is he's the person who invented the Patriotic army. Prior to Napoleon, you might have 2 or 5 or maybe 10,000, perhaps 20,000 people in a standing army for a nation state. And they were basically muscle-brained malcontents or greedy, ambitious second sons of noblemen, or people who couldn't think of anything much else to do with their life, and they liked the idea of hacking and slashing and being fit, and they also liked the idea of the rape, loot and pillage, which went with war in the old days. But what Napoleon did was he took people who'd been more or less disemployed by the beginnings of the Industrial Revolution, and he got these unemployed peasants, agricultural workers, and he gave them 6 weeks military training. And then he set out on his tour of conquest. Now, he took an army of 450,000 on his Russian whirlwind tour. So 450,000 went along with him. 10,000 came back. Now the other thing you need to know about Napoleon is that by today's standards, he was short. He was a little man. He took 450,000 pairs of tall French testicles to Russia, and he turned them into frozen compost. 490,000 pairs of tall French testicles. So the height of the average Frenchman dropped way down. There's a cliche that you should never frighten a little man because it'll fester in his mind, and later on he'll sneak up and he'll kill you. So France became, on a national scale, a nation of little men. And they had to sort of overcompensate, and they had various Prussian wars, and come 1914 they were only too keen to prove how big and strong and tough they were, and they declared war on Germany and the Austro-Hungarian Empire because they were allied to Britain and Russia was declaring war on the Austro-Hungarian Empire because a Serbo-Croatian shot an Austro-Hungarian in a town called Sarajevo. These days nobody gives a shit who shoots a Serbo-Croatian or an Austro-Hungarian in Sarajevo. We've learned not to care about these things. But anyway, getting back to the story of Napoleon, he invented this patriotic army. And the idea was to have so many tens of thousands of semi-regimented peasants that your army of 10 or 20,000 20-year veterans who are all expert swordsmen and expert marksmen, really good at artillery, their arm gets tired from the hacking and the slashing, and the bore of their musket fills up with lead, and they can't fit another one down, and they just get overwhelmed. They get swamped by the numbers of the patriotic army. So the rest of Europe sort of looked on in horror at what Napoleon had done to warfare, and they came up in England at a place called Rugby with a game where you had a leader and a deputy leader and a bunch of cannon fodder, and you carried out a ritual attack of the territorial enclave of the males of the neighbouring tribe while defending your own territorial enclave against an equally ritual attack. And if for the glory and honour of the sporting team you had to have your leg broken sideways through the knee, such that you would never be much good for anything ever again, well, that was considered glorious and brave and honourable and noble. The psychosexual overtones I've covered in a different clip, but might as well cover them again here. Freudian analysis of football consists of 11, 13 or 15 overcompensated latent homosexuals facing 11, 13 or 15, depending on the code, equally overcompensated latent homosexuals squabbling for possession of a symbolic sperm packet, competing to impregnate the symbolic legs at opposite end of the paddock. And sure enough, when the local football team from here travels to the next town and beats the enemy on their home ground, there's nearly always somebody from the netball team or the basketball team or perhaps the hockey team who's always wanted to fuck an entire football team. So we start the little boys and little girls in organised team sports. And we start them at it in primary school. And by the time the 6-year-olds have had 10 years of playing feetball, you can give them an AK-47 at 16 and send them over the hill from Bosnia into Herzegovina or Macedonia or Serbo-Crow, whatever it is now. And they'll dutifully shoot all the men and root all the women. That's what their rape camps were about. Isn't that the theory of it? They use rape as a tool of war these days. Go over the hill and rape all the women and leave them pregnant. So then when you go home, they raise their kid in an atmosphere of sadness and misery. And the kid decides that the people on the other side of the hill who raped their mothers are a bunch of arseholes. So the whole thing perpetuates and it's kept alive by warfare. It's kept alive by sport. And the warfare and the sport, they're almost inextricable now. Sport is industrial mass population training for warfare. You get 26 team players down there on the sacred turf, squabbling over their little sperm packet and carrying out unarmed combat infantry attack and defence drills. And you get hundreds of thousands of people, millions of people watching and worrying about what's going to happen and what the results are and who the heroes are. It is perfect practice for the group polarisation of the population necessary to support an army in the field. How many Australians have we got playing hopscotch in the minefields of Absurdistan? 5,000 perhaps? 2,000? There's numbers in the thousands. How many people live in Australia? 22 million. They've even got me paying goods and services tax to the federal government to buy the bullets and the hand grenades that the Australian Special Air Service Squadron throws in through the windows of the mud brick huts when they can't get their plastic fantastic 17 calibre stayers to shoot through the walls. But the people who live in the wrong house that the Australians have jumped in to raid at night because they got the address wrong, the people who live in there, they are allowed, because it's an American satellite state, they're allowed to have one AK-47 per house to defend against home invaders. And if you're in a mud brick house or a wattle and daub house and the home invaders are in the next room, it's pretty easy. You can shoot straight through it with a 7.62mm Russian cartridge. But the little plastic fantastics the Aussies have got, they won't work. So the Australians run around outside and threw hand grenades in through the windows. Killed about 5 women and a couple of kids, plus the bloke with the AK-47. And then, of course, they whitewashed themselves at the inquiry and said it wasn't their fault that the address was wrong. If it had been a real insurgent, you know, they would have been bloody heroes, wouldn't they? But they didn't get court-martialed either. The court-martial got cancelled. So, yeah. Organised team sport, pan-European social response to Napoleon. And what proportion of planet Earth's raw materials and energy, and therefore pollution, global warming gases emitted, mass in the landfill, what proportion of all that economic activity is devoted purely to worrying about sport? All the better to socialise the next generation to want to kill each other and to indoctrinate the population with the reflex of stand up and salute any time a flag is waved and a bugle is blown. If I had my way, all forms of organised competitive team sport which are of a militaristic territorial based attack and defend nature would be banned as pathological activity, not good for the human race. If people want to compete, why don't they compete growing vegetables? Hey? Or making the topsoil grow up to cover the rocks? Why don't they compete to make the biodiversity and the biomass increase? while they're looking after a part of the landscape. Beats the shit out of worrying about who's going to win the football match or the croquet game. One of the reasons the bloody English have had such a great run at their wars is they invented cricket, where you not only do your attack and defence drill, you also get practice at endless hours of boredom, mind-buggering boredom, interrupted by sudden random spurts of terror. When somebody throws one of those cricket balls at the batsman and he hits it and it comes down out of the sky at the fielders. It also gives them experience of having to go out there and stand in front of the wickets and have the balls bowled at them at 120 miles an hour. Team sports. Social indoctrination for war. Antisocial activity should be banned. Not joking. This is just a pacifist view. You know, somebody who's nursed 2,000 war veterans for an average of 10 days each and picked up the pieces from 1914 to 1984. Organised team sport is a bad idea. Ciao.